So how did I come up with this title? The prime title. Wait, what? You want to know my story? So I have long felt, and it continues to be reinforced daily, if not hourly. Why do people do family history? Why do people care about genealogy? I believe at the core of that care, of that interest, is a longing to know our stories. As Alex Haley said, marrow deep. That's not bone deep, that's within the bone, marrow deep in each of us. It's a longing to know our family history, know our stories. And so I put a subtitle on there, How Telling One's Story Can Get Other Family Members Interested in Their History. Two thoughts may be drifting through your mind or maybe even racing through your mind. Wait a minute, Kurt. Aren't the family historians in a holiday gathering, at a family reunion, those people that, are kind of pushed back and ostracized because, oh my gosh, there's Kurt again talking about the family history. There's Aunt June again talking about all her research. We don't really care about that. Well, that should float through your mind because those things do happen, right? But I think that's because we're not telling the story well. We're all about us rather than all about sharing the story. I do believe that telling our family stories does get other people in our families, and maybe even not in our families, interested in finding their family stories or helping us find our shared family stories. And I believe it can be really powerful for us as people who quest, thirst, long for finding their family stories. So I hope to cover three things in the few minutes we have together this afternoon. The first is the power of story. Oh my goodness. I don't think we really fully intellectually and emotionally appreciate the power of story. It is so powerful. Second, how and when we can tell our stories. And then three, what we can expect. What outcome can we expect from that? So the power of story, just backing out of the family history arena just for an instant, story is powerful. And finally, in the last 4 to 6 years, educators, sociologists, psychologists have been endorsing what we as family historians have known all along, that story is powerful. Early literacy depends on story. Story is an early literacy piece of a good beginning. What are educators telling us? Educators are telling us that those children who enter kindergarten with many thousands of words in their knowledge base that they recognize and understand will excel the rest of their lives better than those kids who enter kindergarten with several hundred words. Think about that. At age 5 or 6, your life destiny is somewhat determined by how many stories you've heard, how many words you've heard. So story is so powerful that instead of cooking macaroni and cheese for dinner with my kids, I tell the story of me cooking macaroni and cheese. First, we go over to the faucet and we fill the pot with water. We place the pot on the stove. Be careful when the stove is hot. Then we turn the burner on. Then the water comes to a boil. You get the idea. Think of all the words that my kids heard when I was telling the story of making mac and cheese for dinner. They heard about faucet and water and careful and hot and boiling, just from me telling that story. So story is powerful from the beginning of our lives through the end of our lives. My own mother, who is dealing with dementia in a care facility, show her a picture of the first half of her life. Talk to her about, show a picture of parents and siblings, and she brings those stories right back out of her memory banks immediately. Sometimes she tells them to me as though they were brand new and I'd never heard them before, and I've heard them dozens, if not hundreds of times because she repeats a lot. But that's such a powerful thing, story. Seeing a picture brings that story back, and hearing stories keeps that long-term memory alive, or more alive as the short-term memory is degrading. Experiencing a story, medical professionals, psychologists tell us alters our neurochemical processes. They actually can trace that cortisol and oxytocin are released from our brain into our bodies during the telling of a story. It's that powerful. Story is powerful. It's a powerful force in shaping human behavior. You can be prejudiced against someone, you can be mad at someone, you can pity someone, whatever emotional you want to assign to how you can casually look at someone and make a snap judgment. When you hear their story, your opinion, your emotion likely will change. Story is so powerful. Even when our children hear stories of failure, stories of tragedy, hearing that story and seeing that we survived that story and hearing how we articulate that story is meaningful for them. Changes, alters their development. Story is powerful, so powerful on so many levels. Listening and telling stories, listening and telling stories, powerful and persuasive for bonding and changing behavior. I'm not saying that. Educators, sociologists, psychologists are saying that. I find this next statement fascinating. There is no other, now think about this, there is no other human activity that we can engage in that lights up more of our brain than participating in story. Think about that. Many might equal it, but nothing eclipses us. Hearing story literally changes people. It's engagement through sharing. So if we want people to help us continue our quest to find more of our family stories, one way to do that is to share our family stories, really of high consequence. So stories help us connect on an emotional level. Stories play to the puzzle solver in us, and many people are puzzle solvers. And kind of a tangent to that, it heightens one's sense of investigation. Like, I'm going to solve this problem. And stories provide context, comfort, and belonging. And that's a way to make people emotionally feel good about us telling our stories and about them researching and telling their stories. So why the disconnect between, boy, we're not welcome people at some family gatherings and some holiday parties with family when we're telling our stories? Because I think we're telling the story not quite the way we should. I don't like to use the negative term wrong, because a part of me feels intellectually and emotionally there's really no wrong way, like totally wrong way. But I think there are better ways of telling stories, right? So that's what we're going to focus on in a moment. But I want to do a quick experiment. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here, and I'm going to tell you 2 short stories about Kurt's family. I know you're all excited about my family. We kind of grin widely when we say that, because we know, as family historians, as those seeking our family story, there's almost little in life that's more, I guess, in the way of us finding our story than hearing a story that doesn't relate to our family story. But I'm going to take that risk. So 2 quick stories. I'll try to make them quick. So I know you will say, you're just a father, so I would expect a father to say all these great things about his kids. Well, if you want to feel that way, I totally appreciate that. I totally get that. But I believe what I'm telling you is objectively true, or objectively truer than you think. So my oldest son is extremely brilliant, extremely brilliant. He cares very deeply. Sometimes he doesn't quite communicate how deeply he cares about something. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a part of who he is. He's very smart. His mind is always working, thinking, musing, evaluating. And I think that's been beneficial to him, and he cares really deeply. So you kind of marry those 2 things and you get some interesting occurrences in life. So not too long ago, within the past 2 years, he was wanting to propose to his longtime girlfriend. He wanted to be a surprise, number one, but he wanted to let her pick the rings. He thought she should pick the rings that she's going to wear for the rest of her life. But he wanted to give her a ring when he proposed to her. And like, how was he going to do that? So Mark asked a familiar type question that he's asked a number of times in his life. Like, his window is pretty short time-wise. And so he contacts us and he asks if we have a spare engagement ring. Yes, everyone has a spare engagement ring. But that's Mark. He wanted to do something really special. He wanted to do it the right way. And as luck would have it, we did have a spare wedding set. And so we boxed it up and we sent it to Mark. And turns out that his girlfriend, then fiance, now wife, got married on September 25th, really liked the wedding set that Mark had polished up and cleaned up from his grandmother. So how wonderful is it that this precious metal that wrapped the hand of his grandmother that he had such love and affinity for is now wrapping the finger of his wife? How wonderful is that? And it all came from Mark's inquisitive mind wanting to do things well and thinking about things and asking the question, do you have a spare engagement ring? So many years ago, I lost a first cousin. Brenda Chatton was just a beautiful, unique individual. My family is a pretty broken family, so Brenda was so outgoing and caring for the entire family that her demise, her death, which was very sudden, not predicted, abdominal aneurysm, bled out in less than 8 hours, and they really couldn't do anything by the time they discovered what it was. So she was what held the cousins together, what kind of smoothed the edges of such a rough and broken family. And so it was a cloudy day when her funeral was. I could talk for hours, won't, because I said only a couple of minutes, right? So a cloudy day, but there wasn't any rain clouds in the sky. There was no thunder, there was no lightning. But after the service, which was interminable, on our ride to the cemetery, again, overcast, no thunder, no lightning, no anything. As the hearse pulled up and the lead cars pulled up, it was like the sky just opened up and the rain poured straight down. And I titled this little vignette, I Believe in Angels, because what we said, all of us cousins from the 3 sisters, we said, we believe in angels. It was so sad. Her passing was so sad. There was no way for us to intellectually rationalize this meteorological event except to say there was no rain clouds, there was no thunder, rain wasn't predicted that day. So during the graveside service, it poured hard, so hard that the groundskeepers came in and interspersed with the mourners with wooden poles to keep the tent from collapsing around the grave from the weight of the rain coming down. And we said, it had to be angels crying. What else could it be? And the minute the graveside service was over, the rain stopped. Pretty amazing. So, took a little bit longer than I thought. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Don't need an answer. I just would like for you to answer it for yourself. When I told you the wedding story, when I told you the connection of the ring across generations, I'm pretty certain many thoughts went through your mind about your wedding, about a family member's wedding, about a child's wedding, about a grandchild's wedding, about something funny that happened at a wedding, something sad, something weird, something odd. But I'm betting that many thoughts went through your mind. My story triggered your story. When I talked to you about I believe in angels, what us cousins said at Brenda's funeral, I believe in angels, I bet your mind immediately went to a family member, a close friend, an army buddy, a work pal that was almost like a sibling to you that you lost, some funeral experience, some graveside experience, some tragedy experience. I bet my story ignited more than a few stories in your mind, in your brain. That to me is evidence of the power of story. And I think we just demonstrated that collectively amongst us. So story is just so important. Why don't we have family members that embrace us and run to us and say, oh, please, Kurt, tell me another family story, rather than going the other way, grab a beer and say, gosh, if I can just keep this Witcher guy from telling me a story, that'd be great. I think it's how we tell the stories and how we allow people to tag on to our stories. So let's take a look. How and when we can tell our stories. I hope my team here at the library never tires of me saying this, and you'll see a slide in a moment or two that further emphasizes this. But when we are doing the research, when we're endeavoring to find our family stories, we want to be successful, right? And we want to have fun. In the 21st century, my hypothesis is no one, let me emphasize, no one will walk a half a block out of their way to have a miserable time. So if people aren't engaging with our stories, I think they're telling us without saying it, we're not very engaging. We're not telling good stories. So fun and success, as pedestrian as that might sound, I think there's a key to our success in getting people to help us do their family history, to engage with us in finding our family stories, how and when. So first off, I know this sounds really simple and you might be smacking yourself upside the head and saying, oh my gosh, Kurt, I can't believe you're telling me this. Well, it's really important. Of course, be positive. Again, no one's going to walk a half a block out of their way to have a miserable time. If every time you talk about the family, you're talking about sad things, or you're talking about how hard it was to find the records, how Ancestry didn't do this right, and Family Search stopped doing that, on and on and on, it's like, ooh, I'm not sure I want to be part of this storytelling, story investigating thing because not fun. I'll do anything. I'll play solitaire on my phone and it'll be more fun than doing something that sounds really negative. So be positive. Even if what you're talking about isn't necessarily positive, spin the story to have those around you think, wow, I didn't know that about the family. That's pretty remarkable. Gee, I wonder how they survived that. Boy, that's remarkable. I mentioned this a few seconds ago. Make it fun. We don't always have to be teaching the younger generation, the next generation, or the old timers, however we want to context that. We don't always have to be teaching people a lesson. Like, well, I've been doing family history since 2 days after God made dirt. You ought to listen to what I have to say. It's like, no, let's make it engaging, like the two people on the slide there. Yeah, they're using a smart device, but they look kind of pleased, don't they? They look like they're sharing, they're discovering, they're appreciating, they're enjoying. So make it fun. Remember that people engage more when they feel engaged. People will participate more when they feel like their activity, their participation is welcome. That's pretty simple, but sometimes when we're at family gatherings, holiday gatherings are coming up. Thanksgiving will be here before we blink a couple times. The end of the year will be here shortly after that. So make it fun. Oftentimes in our stories, we who do a lot of research focus so much on the how we had to go to this place or use this database, or how expensive Ancestry's gotten, or. It's like, okay, maybe that's a great story to tell other questers on the family history front. But with family, focus on the what. Oh man, I found this great document. I found these wonderful pictures when I was sorting through my archive of family photographs. Figure a way to really focus on the what. We've heard that expression, haven't we, for years, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, think about that. Bring more pictures, literally or figuratively, to your storytelling, and you will engage many more people for much longer and more quickly. So focus on the what. What part of the family story? What artifact have you found? What photograph? What piece of information have you mused about? What connections have you made? And then show the what. Make it personal. I'm going to tell you one little short story, and now you know that I will be asking in my mind a question I won't ask you directly. How did your mind react to the story? But my third son, all my sons had great affinity for their maternal grandparents. In the picture dictionary of life, my in-laws would be definition number one under perfect grandparents. Oh my gosh, perfect grandparents. Well, Grandpa was in World War II and he was injured. He was shot. He had his shirt off one hot summer day, and Brandon noticed a scar on his shoulder. Grandpa told him the story about how he was wounded, how he got his Purple Heart. And then during rest break in the afternoon, went up to his attic and pulled down his helmet, and it had a bullet hole clean through it, much like the image that you see on the screen there. And Brandon was fascinated by how could Grandpa's head still be intact and there'd be a bullet hole through the helmet. He was a little kid at the time, right? But that story that Grandpa told, I could go on for minutes, we don't have that kind of time, about how that story continues to affect in a positive, meaningful, engaging way Brandon's life today. And Brandon, as are all of my sons, are interested in their family stories because it's not about the process. It's not about how arduous it was. It's not about, well, you know, you can't find everything on the internet. You need to do some book research. We've heard all that stuff, right? There's no magic bullet here. We're questing, we're looking to find our family stories, right? And we're going to go wherever we need to go to do that. And that's okay. So make it personal. My sons were fascinated to see Grandpa's report card. You think, big deal. There's absolutely nothing genealogical about this document here at all, except that it's a piece of the story. It gets my sons connected again with Grandpa, even though he's been dead for years. It's like, wow, look at his A's. And Grandpa, who loved to sing, who could play the piano and play the guitar and play the banjo, got a B+ instead of an A in music. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. I mean, make it personal. There's Grandpa on the left as a young child, and my sons were fascinated at this home. And guess what one of their questions was when they first saw this photograph? Like, something's wrong here. Where are the other buildings? Where are the other houses? Where's the neighborhood? Is this in a downtown area? I mean, being able to show them context for yesteryear, huge part of a story. And would you expect a lot of houses around a domicile in Wild Dog Creek, Kentucky? Don't you love that place name? I wish I were from Wild Dog Creek, Kentucky, right? My sons went to a lot of cemeteries with me. And rather than like, oh my gosh, here goes dad again to a cemetery, it was about looking at tombstone inscriptions and iconography and symbols. And they ask about little metal symbols that were in the ground next to the tombstone. What do those mean? They were fascinated with the cemetery about 2 miles from our house. Nothing really extraordinary about the tombstone except the wooden cross left by someone relatively recent from the time that we were there, which was a number of years ago. It says, "Poppy, I love you." And one of my sons said, I need to remember to do that when someone I care about dies. So they made the connection on their own. Living is still caring about this person and still coming to the cemetery and still mourning this person. Story. Powerful, powerful, powerful. So what can we expect if we really engage in positive ways and bringing artifacts, actual physical things to our stories? What can we expect? We can expect excited and engaged individuals. Then we will have other family members interested in their history, which, by the way, becomes our history, right? When we have kind of complained about, this is a tie to our Wednesday with Witcher last week when we complain about, I don't know what to do with all my stuff. No one in my family cares about this stuff. What am I going to do when I'm not here? And there's 7 4-drawer, 5 cabinets full of my stuff. Well, that's at least partially on us, right? Because we haven't done a good job telling our stories. A distant family member, a second cousin numerous times removed would be interested in your 7 4-drawer filing cabinets if we told them, if you told them, if I told them the right story. So my question, have we told them our story? Because our story is their story, right? So at family gatherings, I just strongly this year encourage you to intentionally tell better stories so that when we're telling the stories of our lives, that's also telling the stories of their lives. We can engage more if we appreciate the power of story and storytelling, and if we intentionally do a better job of telling a story that's engaging, that gets our brain plugged into storytelling, because that heightens our sense of awareness and our sense of engagement. So my Wednesday with Witcher for this week, let's focus this holiday season as Thanksgiving is quickly upon us and the end of the year shortly thereafter. Let's focus on telling more stories and being better storytellers.